In my hometown, in central Wisconsin, yeah, everyone went to Dr. Cameron. He was the closest physician within 30 miles of the closest hospital. And when you went to see Dr. Cameron, you made sure you went when there was something absolutely wrong. And I know I'm stating the obvious, but let me explain. Because not only did you go when there was something wrong, in return, he would sermonize you about a variety of other things. Whether it was a little bit of gossip going on in town and he was going to tell you about it, or if there was some political stuff going on, or just whatever conversation was going on in the middle of his head, he would then launch you into the middle of it, whether you liked it or not. And his conversations usually had meaning behind it. And I was recalling one this week as I was putting this sermon together. And it was the time when I dislocated my pinky finger when I was playing basketball. My mom took me into the office, and she sat at the door on one of those chairs, and I sat up on that raised area. And Dr. Cameron looked at me and said, "Well, why didn't you put it back into place?" I didn't know how to put my finger back into place, Doc. I don't know. Sarah, look at how your finger moves. Look at all the joints. Then gently touch your finger, feel how it goes, and then eventually your joints will go back into place. And it did. And I don't know if this was part of the tactic of not making me be so focused on it. I wasn't distracted at all. I was just like, why is he chiding me for not putting my finger back in place? And as he's telling me about this, he then launches into this sermon, the commentary going on in his head, about integrity and dignity. And as people, we all have a sense of worth. And we all matter, and we must adhere to a code of conduct that includes justice and love for all, even if we don't like one another. So Sarah, as you're playing basketball, looking to beat your opponent, you should still care if someone is hurt. And you should still care even if they lose and you win. It is the responsibility of being a human and being a part of community. And just because you live on a farm, Sarah, doesn't mean you live in a silo. Yeah. Thanks, Doc. You have to pay attention to what you think about yourself and the role you play within the place you live. And looking back, that's what I heard when I was in 7th grade. Dignity and integrity do matter. And at times it seems that our culture has forgotten these basic tenets. In addition to being basic tenets of everyday living, dignity and integrity is a part of who we are as a people, as a congregation, and what we give to each other in response to living out a life of purpose and hope. What gives us purpose? What gives us hope? The passage from Isaiah 65 this morning is full of beautiful images, even wonderful rhetoric, a means of persuading listeners and hearing about a vision of a world healed of its brokenness, and where the promises of God's love and justice are made real for all people and all creation. The promise of God's integrity and dignity made real in God's people. This text, in comparison to the gospel reading this morning, a reading that offered an apocalyptic vision with enough trouble and heartache and loss and sadness to make the strongest person quake with fear. Yet in this gospel text, we hear Jesus' assurance that even when all looks lost, we can trust in the creative presence of God, who will put a word on our lips, a song in our hearts, with the wisdom and strength we need for the most difficult of times. Even when it appears appears all is lost, God calls us to participate in the healing promises of God's witness and truth. The portion we read from Isaiah is a part of that section of Isaiah known as 3rd Isaiah. Chapters 56 through 66 make up 3rd Isaiah, where the soundtrack changes from oracles of judgment and pessimism about how people are living to promises of restoration and peace at every level of existence. 3rd Isaiah simply means that another prophet came along and used Isaiah's name to keep Isaiah's message alive. It is not intended, however, to be a new heaven and new earth that comes as a result of the former creation being completely destroyed. Rather, it suggests God's transformation of the old into something new, teeming with God's delight and desire. 3rd Isaiah's message preaches itself. The holy mountain best describes this movement of the new arising from the destruction of exile, violence, instability, and lack of relationship with God. The news takes us to whole new heights, or the new takes us to whole new heights. The people are promised freedom from the threat of invasion and attack, economic stability because the land will give provision for all, and lives of blessing. These speeches were first heard by the earliest of the people of Judah returning to Jerusalem after exile. Everything in the city needs to be rebuilt and reimagined so as it takes shape as a whole new society, and what Isaiah would suggest is in obedience to God. The time is right for convincing people to be a part of God's new vision of reality. God's vision and promises are also relevant to us, needing to believe in God's capacity to reform, transform, and make new that which is most wrought with harm. The new reminds us of dignity and integrity in its fundamental forms. After everything that we have been through in our lives, and even as we continue to come through this pandemic time, we know things are different. Things have changed, and they continue to change. Things cannot be done the same way. The Spirit is moving, and the possibilities are infinite. Creating and recreating is hard, and it's filled with uncertainty, and yes, I'm a little excited to see what God is recreating in us as we do our work through Partners in Vision, as we continue our work in evaluating who we are and our purpose, and in what ways we model dignity and integrity as a congregation here on the east side of St. Paul. It's timely then to hear these words from the prophet Isaiah. Rise us up today and to tell us that getting to the top of that mountain will be glorious, and it's going to be hard, and it is possible to get there with God, because all things are possible with God. What did the prophet say this morning? They won't labor in vain nor bear children to a world of horrors, because they will be people blessed by God, they along with all their descendants. Mountaintop experiences in Scripture are a big deal. It's something for us to focus in on, to lean in a little bit more. It's a place where humans draw nearer to the divine and the blessings are carried back down. And the Bible records mountaintop experiences quite often. Moses receives the 10 Commandments on the top of the mountain. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus gives the people some of his greatest wisdom in the Sermon on the Mount. Later, Jesus' face shines like the sun on top of the mountain as awestruck disciples watch him converse with Moses and Elijah. Mountains are set apart. They are sacred. And in the book of Isaiah, they offer us an image of the true expansiveness of God's vision for our world. Yet one of the significant challenges people of faith face is trusting God in the present moment. The past provides great temptations for people who prefer to spend energy there, and so goes the future. There is an abundance of people who make a vocation out of worrying about what lies ahead. It is an irony of church life that we who claim the promises of God still find ourselves struggling with fear. Our scriptures today address this irony by offering guidance for reviewing the past, living in the present, and rejoicing in the presence of what God is doing in our midst right now. And let us not equate faith with being naive. God's presence is with us as we climb that mountaintop. How many of us have seen the mountains? You've seen some version of them? Yeah. And on that clear day, how can you not be awestruck by the sheer beauty, strength, and grandeur that the mountains represent? It is this vision of unmatched strength and grandeur that the prophet invites us to consider as we imagine God's holy mountain. The mountain is the New Jerusalem, where the former things of violence and death, greed and threat and exile are forgotten, and new possibility is presented. The holy mountain is both heaven here on earth and a realm that exists beyond our current one. The harmony suggested in this new heaven is where the wolf and the lamb come together, redeemed by love and created to work alongside. And yet, this certainly does seem to be quite the rhetorical image. How could this even possibly be? Likes to find the order of things. The time has come for us to value the human spirit and to trudge up that holy mountain. There will be days we look back down wanting to go back to the way things were, believing perhaps it was easier. And yet we know that isn't necessarily true, because we wouldn't be heading up that mountain then, would we? I'm heading to the top because, frankly, I want to see what God sees. Don't you? That means, however, we might have to have some uncomfortable conversations with family and friends. This might mean we need to be informed voters and then go out and vote like I hope we all did this past week. This means we need to look at our lives and evaluate our words and actions and see how they align. This means we need to look at our mission as a faith community, and are we living out Christ's call to discipleship? God keeps speaking to us, and God still hopes in us. And I'm grateful that God has not lost sight in what God's people can do for each other and the planet in which we live. God has a dream with a great deal of dignity and integrity, and we are called to be a part of it. So it may be.